For those who seek adventure, this is the Buffalo Roamer Podcast, sharing the people, places, and moments that make a life on the loose worth living.
The thing that's going to stick out to you most is when they open up that plane door. The cold is something like you've never felt.
The jungle's so thick, even if you had a machete, you couldn't get through it.
There's a huge blonde grizzly bear. And when it saw us, this thing put its head down, stomped on the ground, and hissed like an alligator.
I just crossed this brutal stretch of desert, and I was really suffering.
I'm your host, Will Collins. I'm an adventurer, outdoorsman, and roamer of wild places. I've backpacked the Brooks Range, rafted the Grand Canyon, and have canoed from source to sea, both the Mississippi and Yukon rivers. I live for adventure, travel, fresh air, and diving into the unknown. And now, I hope to share my passion with you on the Buffalo Roamer Podcast. All right, here we go, episode 48 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. Thanks for tuning in. If you're enjoying the show, please subscribe to the podcast. That makes sure you get new episodes when they drop the first and third Friday of every month. And you can also find out more at buffaloroamer.com about what we got going on. Today's show, Macklin Scheldrup is on the podcast. Mac is a traveler and outdoorsman. He's a good friend of mine from college in Colorado, and just an all-around good guy, and had a good time chatting with him about travels and the outdoors. So without further ado, episode 48, Mac Scheldrup of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors. How was your trip on the Root River? I got a lot I want to talk to you about, but you said you were heading up there recently, right?
Yeah. Did Root River. It was just a one night. We car camped kind of near the Root River Trail there, which is a great little trail system they have.
And this is in Iowa?
This is in Minnesota. So this is the southeast corner of Minnesota.
Okay.
This was near the town of Preston, and then went closer to Lanesboro. That's where we kind of parked the car to start the shuttle, and then drove up a little bit more. And yeah, it was about 15 miles in total for 2 days. It was nice. It's a beautiful river. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. And it's Minnesota, Driftless. You get some bluffs or anything like that?
Oh yeah, plenty of bluffs, some heron here and there, some great limestone faces. Exactly what we want out of Driftless. A few like cornfields tucked in between little valleys.
Nice, man. I love it. Yeah, I just got back. I was up in the Boundary Waters this past weekend. I just got back yesterday, so that trip was awesome. That was a blast.
Yeah, I bet.
Went up there with my buddy, and I'll just tell a little bit about it because it's funny. I was up there with my buddy Nico, who's a relatively novice camper, and bless you. And it was fun being up there with him. Originally, I was supposed to go up with another friend, and we were going to be fishing a bunch, and he had to back out, so I ended up going up there with just me and Nico, and it was great, man. It was a beautiful area. We got windbound so it was 3 nights, 4 days, and on the third day, we were like completely windbound, just huge white caps rolling over the lake, like couldn't make any progress, and yeah, it was an experience. It was fun though. We were like hunkered down. But we had to get back to our portage because we had to hike out the next day. So we were trying to make progress through this windbound day and like slowly inching, and then we had to pull off on the shore because it was too windy, and we had like hunkered down in our rain gear for like 2 hours as the wind is like whipping rain across the lake, and we're like waiting for a tiny little weather window. Then we get like a tiny window and make another, half mile or something before we have to pull off again. Yeah, it was interesting.
What kind of leader are you with a friend who doesn't camp much there? Are you the guy who says like, "Oh no, we're almost there. Don't worry about it." Like, "Oh no, the weather's going to improve. I can see it in the distance."
No, I try and be real. And especially in those situations, because it was some dicey stuff. It was super windy, and we had a couple big open water crossings. And he was pretty optimistic about it. Like when we first had to pull off because of the wind, he's like, "Oh yeah, we'll pull off, give it 20 minutes or something, and maybe we'll come back out." In the back of my head, I'm like, "Oh man, this could we could be stuck here all day." Like those waves. They were big, and you know, yeah, the only saving grace was that I forgot a tarp, so we didn't have a tarp to like shelter under. So luckily it wasn't just absolutely downpouring as we were windbound and like huddled up in the trees. I was thinking that in the back of my head too. I was like, oh man, this could be a lot worse if it were just raining cats and dogs and we had nowhere to shelter. All our stuff's packed in the boat and we're just, exposed. Yeah, fun stuff. Well, hey, tell me about some of your travels. I want to talk about camping, the outdoors, and
Absolutely.
and some different trips. But let's get into some of your travels because I know you've been to some interesting places and worked in some interesting places. And I guess the first thing that I remember is, and I mentioned this on our trip, is right after college, we went to college together. At graduation, we were all hanging around at the Dark Horse there in Boulder, and your mom was sitting around the table. You were going to work in Afghanistan as a civilian contractor. You took a random job in Afghanistan, and I remember your mom just sitting around the table looking at us all, being like, say goodbye to Mac. This is the last time you'll ever see him. She was not too excited about you taking that post-college job in Afghanistan.
No, yeah. A lot of family was not super happy about that decision. But it was like a chance, yeah, for the adventure.
Yeah, what was it, and yeah, what were you doing there, I guess, and
Yeah.
why did you want to go?
So it was the job I had was working for a small kind of research company that was owned by some Americans, some French, some Africans. And what we would do, we'd get hired by the big NGOs like Oxfam, or we'd get hired by the foreign aid agencies like USAID or DFID, which is the UK's agency. And we would evaluate their programs. So we would design research to go out and collect data in the field where the programs are occurring. Things like a survey, or we might do like focus group discussions with people who are benefiting from the project or local elders, that kind of thing. Bring that data back and then write a report. So it was a way to kind of use, I did a political science major. It was a way to use kind of the quantitative social science skills that I had. And it was just a random interview that I had to do it. And like, I think there it was the kind of companies I work for there. They were fine having a 22-year-old with no experience be their like best quantitative guy. Like
Sure.
I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew more than anyone else.
I love it. That's great. And how long were you there?
So I was in Kabul for 2 years or so. Yeah, I was there from the summer of 14 to the summer of 16.
Okay. And what was that like? Just generally speaking, that's a long time. That's not just a a month or 2 week visit. What was that like, just in terms of living, as a civilian in Afghanistan during a time of war?
Sure. I mean, it was that time when I was there, the war, it wasn't near you, but it also wasn't that far away.
And you're in Kabul.
Things would happen in Kabul. Yes. There would be bombings in the mornings during rush hour. I do remember like the first time a car bomb went off in the city and I could like feel the windows shake and like kind of feel my heart in the morning, and then get a text from the company be like, hey, you're not going to get picked up for a few hours. You can just work from home. It was one of those things of like kind of realizing that it was around, but wasn't dictating life for people who lived in the city. Like people's lives went on every day. You might have, like, I remember a very distinct morning sitting in my office with my Afghan boss and like hearing and feeling some sort of explosion happen. You could tell it was a big one, but kind of far away. We just kind of looked at each other. I remember him going, that one seemed far away. And I just went, yeah, I think it did. And we just went back to our laptops and kept working. And that was like one thing that I took from living and working there, was just the resilience that a lot of people had. And it made me like realize that life can go on in a lot of difficult circumstances, like beautiful things in life, family and friends and all, professional accomplishments and personal accomplishments that can occur when there is instability and violence around. Like it wasn't consuming the war there, at least when I was there at the time. Certainly that has changed since in a lot of ways. But when I was there for that 2 years, it was a period of like conditions are certainly getting worse, and the foreign presence was drawing down, but it was still somewhat significant. And Kabul itself could be like would feel safe for months on end, and then you'd have like 2 bad months of like a bombing every week sort of thing. It would be very inconsistent.
And what was your overall, overarching takeaway, if that's not too broad of a question,
Sure.
From your 2 years there?
This is a more like pessimistic takeaway than I might normally say, but like I think it's important to realize that incompetence is a driver of a lot of things in the world. And it's a good way to like disprove conspiracy theories when you're in places like this. Like, oh no, this bad policy didn't occur for an evil reason. It occurs because people are incompetent and don't know what they're doing. Like just seeing that and like seeing millions of dollars going to projects that weren't working. It's very difficult.
Yeah,
I think in a lot of ways. And like the importance of also like having a functioning government. There are the small things. Like one thing I learned was that a lot of my colleagues, every January 1st on my Skype, because that's how I would communicate back there, I get all these birthday alerts. And it's because up until like the 21st century, Afghans didn't really track their birthdays. And the only reason people do that is when the government can provide you with services like education, social security, retirement benefits, all these things. We need to know, then they need to know your age so you remember your birthday. But for most of these people's lives, that wasn't a thing. So it was just like, oh yeah, I don't know my birthday, so I just put January 1st, and like I think I was born this year. It was those kind of small things like, oh, it's really important to have a functioning institution,
sure,
to like govern and to keep stability. Yeah.
And how
enough about the political science part. The travel was also nice because my first job, it was in foreign aid. You get paid awful. Like I was getting paid nothing at the time to be working in these environments, but like I had a place to stay for free. So I didn't spend anything. And like I got 6 weeks or more of travel, of PTO, and you just hop on a jet to Dubai on like the cheap airline that goes to Dubai. And from Dubai, you go anywhere in Asia or Europe or East Africa. That part was great of like exploring the world and the parts of the world that people don't often go to.
Sure. And how about, I want to dive into some of the list of some of your favorite travels and spots. But how were you accepted as an American in Kabul?
So I would say generally good. I mean, my colleagues by and large were fantastic humans who like brought me into their homes and like would take me out to their home villages on the weekends and things. Like I got to experience all these really beautiful, like precious memories now in retrospect, because these colleagues brought me into their homes. And in that regard, like it's unambiguous. Like they treated me great. And then generally speaking, Afghanistan is an interesting country. Like I could pull off looking Afghan. Like I am a white guy with green eyes, hazel eyes, and brown hair. And like what I used to say is like, as long as you're not blonde or black, you can probably look Afghan. Like they have an ethnic group that looks very East Asian. They have an ethnic group that looks very South Asian. Ethnic groups that look more Persian or European even. They even have one ethnic group that's redheaded. Like it's. So I would dress in the shalwar kameez, like the local garb, and like walk around the city. Like it was great. I would just like leave my door and like spend a Saturday or a Friday, which because the weekends there were Friday, Saturday, I would just spend an afternoon, like 2 hours walking around the city. And as long as nobody asked me to talk, no one seemed to notice me.
Yeah, I remember you brought back the hats for us back.
Yeah, the pockles.
Yeah.
The pockles. Yeah, yeah.
The little
They're great hats. Like problem is like
the rolled
now
up hats.
Wool hats.
Yes.
Yeah. If anyone wants to know it, you should Google Massoud, Massoud. He was the famous warlord who fought the Soviets, who always had this big pockle on his head. And And like you could also tell where in the country someone was from by how thick their pockle was. There were certain
Interesting.
regional varieties that happened, and like there'd be a couple provinces they'd put a big feather in their pockle. It's like a brilliant headwear piece, but like I can't wear that now. I'm gonna look like an asshole. Like,
Hey man, fashion. You just got to rock it.
yeah,
You just got
right.
to be
I just got to
confident.
go to Williamsburg, Brooklyn, and yeah, be the
Yeah,
hipster.
yeah, you'll fit right in.
Yeah.
How about like culturally and maybe within Afghanistan? Are there any like interesting cultural things that stick out, or like cool visits that you made within Afghanistan?
Yeah, I mean, so one province that we would go to often because it was close to Kabul and it like was always the traditional anti-Taliban bastion was a place called Panjshir. And it's this gorgeous valley. They have to get there, you eventually have to go through. They call it the what was that? Shir de Darwaza, so like the door of the lion. So Panjshir means 5 lions, and it's this old story about I don't know
Five Lions.
lions and like the founders of the place. But there's this massive. It looks like a gate from Lord of the Rings almost because these cliffs just come up, and there's just one little road that gets you into the valley. It's the only way to get in by car, and there's security there. But once you get in there, it's this beautiful place with this completely undammed massive river going through. And there's a few other rivers around that would be incredible whitewater rafting if it ever opened up because they don't have any damming there. And like the outdoor possibilities in Afghanistan are huge. I used to have friends that did like ski races in Bamyan province, right in the center of the country, another like very stable place in the country for most of the time. Like there was ski touring going on in Afghanistan while I was there.
I've heard a lot about, or not a lot, I should say, but I have heard of some snowboarding and skiing in Pakistan. Obviously, they're big mountain climbers out there as well.
Yeah, up north, there's a little tiny resort, I think. Yeah, way up north there. Yeah, and I lived in Pakistan after Afghanistan, so I did spend about 8 months in Islamabad after that, and I never got that far north, and I always regretted it. It was something I was planning on doing, and then I ended up having to, leave the country, leave the job early. But that's another country where like there's that area in the north there, Hunza Valley, all that stuff in the Karakoram Mountains is just incredibly gorgeous.
I remember seeing some of the photos of you, and it's like to me at least, like the picturesque, Afghan or Middle East river valley of like the long the turquoise blue rip roaring river and like the long rickety bridge that looks like some Indiana Jones style.
Yeah, I think I know that was probably the Kabul River in between Kabul and Jalalabad to the east, so like heading towards Pakistan's the border there. And again, it would be this gorgeous, like some of the valleys there just mind-blowing, the sheer size of the cliffs on the sides and like how quickly the rivers are dropping, because Kabul itself is, I would say, 6,000 something feet, maybe low 6,000, so it's above Denver, and by the time you're getting to like the plains in Pakistan, you're at 800 feet, so you're dropping quite quickly, and you get these great valleys.
How about your time in Pakistan? So you did 2 years in Afghanistan, civilian as working contracts, and how about Islamabad?
Yeah, Islamabad's interesting. So it was built in the 50s as like it didn't exist before Pakistan was a country. When Pakistan became a country, they wanted to build a new capital. So they built Islamabad. So it's this very like it's all a grid system, but a weird kind of grid system, and they number and letter every neighborhood. So there is one going north to south, you have numbers, and going east to west, you have letters, or vice versa. And like every neighborhood was planned, and they'd have a market in the middle. It was kind of a weird town, but it was also great because the city itself is butting up against a national park. There are these massive mountains right there. So I used to just like leave my house in Islamabad and go on these like hikes into the mountains by myself. And like, frankly, the scariest part of that was like coming across a gang of 25 monkeys and me being like, do I just walk past them?
Please, not me.
Yeah, not me. Yeah, so it was the Margala Hills is what they're called right there, and it's sort of the start of going out of the Punjab plain, which is a lot of Pakistan and like Western India. And it's sort of the start of the foothills into the Himalayas.
Okay, awesome. I've had a few other people who've traveled to Pakistan on. One guy, I think Brett, as his name was, Social Cycles. He leads trips, an Aussie guy. He leads cycling trips in Pakistan.
Yeah.
And I've heard that the people there are just phenomenal. I don't know if you had that experience or what your
Yeah, I think up
experience
north
was.
especially.
Yeah.
I think in Pakistan, so Pakistani society is interesting. I think that in a lot of ways the government has kept its power through conspiracies and through convincing the public that there is this external enemy. Usually it's India, but like they're willing to throw in Israel and the US or Afghanistan if they want. And that Pakistani society felt more conspiratorial and like less open than when I was in Afghanistan. Like Afghan seemed much more open and friendly, whereas Pakistanis, at least in Islamabad, and like again, like
Your experience.
I shouldn't judge America if I lived in DC. I was living in DC in Pakistan.
Sure.
But like it was not nearly as open as
Okay.
I felt in Afghanistan.
And how about some of the cultural things that anything you found interesting in Islamabad?
It's because it is not an old city at all. It is a city of like transplants, in very much the same way as DC is, where it is like Pakistanis from a lot of different places are moving there to work in government related things. So you do get to meet a lot of people who are from different parts of the country. And you also get like the military old guard still living there. And like the military there controls not everything, but like everything.
Sure.
So my landlord was a retired admiral, and like you just walk around and you see like, oh, this is the house of such and such brigadier general, and like 2 blocks away from me was AQ Khan, who was the grandfather of the Pakistani nuclear weapons program, who also sold some secrets to North Korea to start their program. And I remember his house because it had a basketball hoop outside. So I guess he had like grandkids who just like to play basketball in the driveway. But it was like in this primo spot, like next to the biggest mosque in the country. Yeah.
That's funny. That's interesting. And what were the what was the contrast between Islamabad, Pakistan, and Afghanistan, and what was the time difference for you between the two stops?
Time difference. I mean, I think I had a couple months in between, but it was close to back to back.
Sure.
I got a new job. I was in the US for a couple months, seeing family and friends. And then I got this job in Pakistan. So I headed that way. And then, yeah, differences in the city, like Pakistan was hotter. That's for sure. Like Kabul was nice because the winters were cold and there was no central heating, which made it so that the valley got clogged up with wood fire smoke. But those kind of winters also like they keep you inside in a way that like you develop relationships with the people who you work and live with.
Sure.
In a way that like Pakistan didn't feel as much because like it was always hot. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe that's just me of like I'm better at cold climates than hot climates.
I hear you.
Yeah.
How about traveling? You said when you were in Afghanistan, you had lots of PTO and easy jet setting from Dubai. What were some of your stops that you were able to check out traveling while you were working there?
The first trip I did after I moved to Afghanistan was 2.5 weeks in Kyrgyzstan. So that's the Central Asian country that is sort of in between Kazakhstan and Tajikistan. To the east is China, to the west are the other stands. And that was a fantastic experience to backpack around there. I had a little 35-liter Go Light backpack I bought in Boulder right before I left town. And that's just all I had for 2.5 weeks. And like just went into the capital and I had a hostel in and met a bunch of sense to like get in line with some person who was like, oh yeah, we're going out with a bunch of friends. This English dude who had been living there for a while, and got probably too inebriated for a first night with some interesting people. But like one of them was like, hey, we're heading down to this tiny town in the south part of the country because it has the world's largest walnut forest, and it's the walnut harvest season. So we're all going down. And I, remember this town, and next morning I'm hungover at the hospital. Actually, was disturbingly hungover in the hospital. Like, couldn't function till 1. And I'm like talking to some people there. I'm like, yeah, there's this town called Arslambad, and like apparently there's this walnut festival. 2 people got us and like traveled for a day to get down there. And Kyrgyzstan's great because they have, I assume it's still there, a very nice community-based tourism system where there's this national system, and they'll tell you all the villages and towns where they function in. And if you go to those towns, you can find the office of the Kyrgyzstan CBT. There'll be someone there who can speak some English, who can speak a Western language. And he can then direct you to like, oh, this house down the road, they take foreign tourists. You pay them this amount of money, and they'll, you can sleep in an extra room they have. And that was really like a great way to see that country, because you'd be living with this Kyrgyz family. And one night it was that we had brought in vodka. So this was an ethnic Uzbek town, and they were a little more conservative. There's only like one liquor store in the city. It was me, this German guy, a Canadian couple, and like the German dude spoke some Russian, and he could talk to the family. And we eventually figured out that they had a working wood fire sauna.
Nice.
And they're like, so we were like, can how much for us to do it? And they're like, they said some number that was like, oh yeah, we're definitely paying that amount to do this. So, they got it ready, and like, we're just like drinking vodka in this sauna for most of the night as like snow is falling down. And the next morning we go for a hike through the world's largest walnut forest.
Wow. As
the walnuts are falling and there's like melting snow everywhere. You just pick up the walnuts on the ground and you start eating them, and that's just how you eat for the day.
That sounds amazing. It sounds like the like picturesque the wood sauna on a snowy day. It sounds great. Drinking Russian vodka.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And I mean, I would say that started my love of like saunas and my ambiguous relationship with vodka.
How about other trips from there that stick out?
Yeah, so when people ask me my favorite place in the world, my favorite country I ever traveled to, my answer is always Georgia. Georgia is an incredible country. I got to do. So this was like a 2.5-week trip again, a week and a half in Georgia, and then a week in Armenia. And it was with 3 of my really good friends who I knew and worked with in Afghanistan. We all traveled together. And Georgia's a place that just has some of the most incredible food, some of the most incredible and varied scenery. And it's a country where like, because since 2008, when, they had that war with Russia and they lost some territory, they've always had this, like, there's a museum of Russian aggression there, but that also meant that everyone under 30 speaks English. Like that's just something they've learned now because they want to move to the West. So it was great to like have that sort of thing where it was easy to get around, but it also felt very authentic and raw, and like the food there. Oh, the booze there. That's where they like founded wine. We had one night, a couple of friends I was traveling with used to work in East Timor, and they knew some Georgian from there, and he was back in Tbilisi when we were there. So he brings us out, and it turns out a lot of guys in Georgia are named some variation of George. Who would have thought? So it was Gorga and Gorga, like George. But anywho, they bring us out there to this like Georgian feast at this restaurant, And what they like to do is, they want to drink to a lot of things, to the old friends who aren't here, to the new friends here with us, to the family who's died, to the family who's still around. And you must drink to it all. And eventually, at every Georgian party, some guy will bring out a guitar and he'll start playing a Beatles song. But the thing is, they have their own lyrics to it. So if you try to sing along with the actual lyrics, they're like, no. We have no, you don't know those. We're doing this.
That's hilarious. And this happened at multiple parties?
The big one we went to, yes, it did happen. And then actually we were at another bar up in the mountains and we did see someone just pull out a guitar and start doing that there. Yeah.
That's funny. When I think of Georgia, I think of big mountain landscapes, like big kind of tundra-esque mountains. Is that accurate from where you were?
That's definitely there. And that's some of our days were spent in the High Caucasus Mountains. Which were that, and some of the views of these ridges were insane. But it's also we went down to the southeast part of the country in a place called Lagodeki, which was tropical plants, and then you have wine country, and wine country transitions into the Black Sea coast, and the Black Sea coast is renowned. Batumi is renowned for its beach culture, Eastern European men in tight speedos on the beach.
You fit right in.
For a tiny ass country, Georgia is just so varied in the landscapes you can find.
That's awesome. As far as Georgia, so what were some of the things that you did that made it memorable? I mean, you said you were hiking, backpacking, but what sticks out to you?
The city of Tbilisi is very gorgeous. The old Soviet republics, you get a mix of their capitals between very old Russian colonial 19th century places and very brutalist. This was built in the 50s because we needed to establish control places. And Tbilisi is definitely the latter, or the former. It is an old city with gorgeous buildings and old neighborhoods that go up into the hills. So that was very cool to just explore for a long time. And then going north out of there, there's a lot of people go there. There's this famous hotel in the city in the mountains. Oh, what is that called? There's a couple names for this city. Now I'm blanking on it, but we have a mutual friend who I've seen on Instagram post that he was there as well. This is a thing that I've seen around,
Sure.
But it is this gorgeous patio that you have in this very nice hotel that looks out on this, 18,000 foot peaks, I want to say, around there.
Awesome.
So that's cool. And then the wine country is gorgeous.
So you say that
that trip was also fantastic.
You say that Georgia was
Yeah.
the original makers of wine? That can't be right.
Yeah. So there's an argument. Armenians also claim it, I know. So Jordans, Armenians, and probably Azeris claim it. They the oldest wine, but not actual wine, but things that to make wine were found in the lower Caucasus.
Okay.
So that, they say that that's the origination of wine.
Huh.
It was also very interesting being there of being told that red wine is for women. We drink white wine here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, red wine is sweet there. The white wine is dry and this is what we drink. No, red wine, it's for the women. It's too sweet for us. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
And
I believe that town, the mountain town I was speaking of, is Stepanakert.
okay.
Yeah.
And what is the cuisine like in Georgia and in similar areas?
So the nice thing, I've already mentioned two former Soviet countries, and a lot of my travels would be to former Soviet republics, because when I was in Afghanistan, my time away, some of my priorities was to drink beer and eat pork. Yeah. These were all places where I could get that cheaply.
That's so funny.
Even in Kyrgyzstan or Tajikistan, that are majority Muslim countries, the Soviet influence is still there. Of oh yeah, there's breweries around, and you can get anything. It's fine. So you get that mix of the Russian shashlik, the grilled meat on sword kind of thing, but you also get that very Asian wherever, Genghis Khan and the Mongols went, those places now have a dumpling. And like, that's just a rule of thumb. And every place does that. And the Georgian dumpling is very huge and has a huge little button on it. And you bite it at the bottom, and you just suck out all the juices, and then you eat all the meat after, and you're just happy.
Sounds great. Sign me up.
They also are
Georgia dumpling.
I mean, if anyone gets a chance, go to a Georgian restaurant. There's a few like famous egg dishes and bread. Like, they have plenty of great cheeses too. I mean, good cuisine cultures, you're looking for places that are like, yeah, I got meat, I got cheese, and I got carbs. Here you go. How
did you get started with the travel bug or traveling? Because jumping, from college to Afghanistan, as a civilian, is not a typical route or a typical path. What did you get bitten by the travel bug?
I don't know. Like a long time ago when I was very young, I was a kid who, like, when my parents needed to distract me at like church or something else, like I'd bring an atlas. Like, I just wanted to look at the maps, even when I was young. I've always been fascinated by just the world, I guess, and like places and how people in those places live, and more importantly, like why those kinds of people are in that place now. Like, what's the history that got them there, and what are the geographic factors that lead them to act the way they do, and rely on the industries and the commerce that they rely on. I think the story of the world is a fascinating story because it is complicated, and it is a story of people moving for a variety of reasons, some good, mostly bad. But like, people survive, and generations go on, and it produces beautiful food, beautiful culture, beautiful stories. Like, it is, embracing it was something that I was so happy to have done, because as a kid who grew up in Iowa and never really left Iowa, and then had never been abroad when I graduated college, I was like, yes, I'm going to Afghanistan because this is what I want. I don't care what the risks are. Like, I need to do this.
And that was your first time abroad?
I had been abroad once before, assuming if we don't count Cancun trips when you're in middle school.
One of the things you said before we got cut off there that I found interesting, and it's something that I've been thinking about recently, is how geography plays a role, I guess, for lack of a better word, like plays a role in just the way that people are, how they got there, or just the way that cultures are in general. And I find it so interesting, and I've only kind of recently started to think about it, but I was talking with Leah, my girlfriend, about it, and I'm like, in the U.S., there has to be something to it. You go to the Northeast, it's cold, windy, harsh, and people are kind of puckered up and generally more mean. And you go over to California, and it's hang loose, easy living. The sun's out all day, every day. I think there is something to that. Harsher climates just maybe produce slightly harsher people. I don't know.
I mean, is Minnesota not a harsh climate? Because they seem lovely.
Well, they're lovely. They are. You're right. But I don't know. There's something. There is. It's just interesting, though, how geography plays an effect on cultures, or even just how people get there, like you said, or like you were saying.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like a pattern of migration that occurs, and it's not just in North America. Like, that's all over the world. That migrations that were happening 300 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,500 years ago, that led people to where they are, and like places that are more difficult to govern, create governments that need to maybe don't govern as effectively, or need to innovate in order to do so. And like the importance of, I think this is also important in U.S. anywhere, of like, what are the water basins like, because that is how people settled initially. Like that's the easy way to get up, is to go up the valley from there. And like, it gets tough when you need to cross over between water basins. And that's why, and the steeper the valleys get, the more isolated they become. And that's certainly the case for places like Afghanistan, for a lot of Central Asia. And you could kind of see that in, the Rockies today, of like, there were some towns that were like stuck up there for a while. And like they were the end of that valley, and there's one dirt mining road that gets you out of it that way. Otherwise you have to go down 20 miles.
Yeah. How about camping? When did you get into camping, and how did you get into camping and kind of the outdoors in general?
Yeah, that was all in college. I didn't do any any camping before college. But when you go out to Boulder, you got to embrace it. And that's kind of what I try to do. And I do remember the exact first spot I went camping ever. It was outside of Buena Vista, Colorado. It was with Uncle Buzz, if you remember him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, sure. An old friend. And I did not know of the existence of sleeping pads. And that's my biggest takeaway from the first night of camping, was that it's really hard to sleep when there's no pad there.
Sleeping pads help.
Yes.
I've been contemplating giving a try to the sleeping cot. Have you seen those?
Yeah, people seem to be bringing those out, and I kind of get it, of like, it's stable.
Yeah, it's like it's like it's kind of folds down to one of those like REI camp chair type sizes, like one of the ones that you had on the trip. That's basically worthless. You're like sitting on the ground and can't get any any traction. You're like an inch off the ground on the poison ivy. But it's breaks down to a similar size. Hopefully, maybe more useful. But yeah, and it just gets you a couple inches off the ground in your tent. Supposedly they're nice. I don't know. I've been going back and forth about whether I should get one and try it out or not.
I mean, the big thing with like tents often is like, oh, there's a puddle of water at the bottom of mine right now after the rain. Like, if you can get off the ground in order to avoid that, like, you're going to be set. You're going to have a lovely night of sleep.
That could be true.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite, natural areas or camping spots that you've been to, or trips that you've done? Are there any that come to mind off the top?
Let's see, your favorite camping areas. I mean, there's the kind of, these aren't going to be unique when I say this, but like the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, of course, is, just an incredible place.
Yeah, it's so steep and
yeah, the Switzerland of America, as they like to call it, which is great because when you go to Northeast Iowa, they also have signs that say the Switzerland of the Midwest.
I guess
Driftless.
I'll take it.
But one area that I would definitely hype up as something that people do not go to at all is Western Utah, Northern Nevada. I love that area, the Basin and Range region. No one's there, but there are these incredible mountain ranges that are coming out of the high plains desert there that are having like 4,000 feet of relief. And you get out of the kind of bland desert from there, but like you go into these mountains and it's lush and it's verdant. There's these dirt roads that'll like take you over passes and stuff. And I remember having a great night of car camping in a national forest in kind of central northern Nevada near the town of Austin. And like I would just remember looking up, and you can see, because the big Air Force bases are all outside Vegas there, you can see the dogfights occurring. You can see the red lights flashing around, and you can like see them dogfighting above you. And I remember in Western Utah, a great area called the Deep Creek Range. Oh, I hope that's the right name. They have a 13er there. This is on the border between Utah and Nevada.
Okay.
Gorgeous range that, like, again, it's because it's so isolated, people are not around there. But I remember camping there and seeing a lot of a ton of satellites, like way more than I was used to seeing. And I kind of put two and two together, and I figured like, oh, those are satellites trying to check on the testing ranges that exist just to the east of me.
Interesting.
In the Dugway Desert there.
Sure.
Like those are America's enemies just checking, like, what's going on. Yeah.
Have you ever seen Starlink in the sky?
Yeah, I did see that. I was on the famous 999 ride in Salt Lake City once, which is the big, drunken late night ride they have there, and like seeing that in the sky, and for a second being like, oh, we're getting invaded. These are aliens.
Yeah.
This is it.
It is,
Until someone just yelled like, "That's Elon Musk!"
it is the strangest thing. I've seen it twice now. First time I saw it, I was here on the farm in Illinois, and it was, just I was outside, and at first I was like, what in the world is that? And like you were saying, I was like, it's like aliens or like
this is Independence Day.
Yeah.
I'm Jeff Goldblum.
Here
There's
we
no way
go.
around it. I gotta go
Yeah, it's the strangest thing.
into the ship.
And then I remember I went and looked it up, and I was like, okay, I don't even know what to search, like line of stars, like what do you search for that? But that was the first time I saw it, and then on a trip in Moab on the Green River, a canoeing camping trip through Labyrinth Canyon, which is just amazing. I've talked about it before, but awesome area. We saw it one night out there too, and I can't remember. I want to say it was the first time I saw it. It was just one line, and then this one, the one in Utah, I don't remember if it was more than one line, but it seemed to last forever, and it's kind of a weird thing because on one hand, it's cool and it's awesome to have internet for everybody all over the world, but on the other hand, it's like you're just littering the stars and the sky. It's not
like we see them after they're put out, right? Like we only see them when they're getting distributed.
No. Well, no, I think you see them. It's just like anything, like a star. You see them, like they have maps where you can see it, every day, or I don't know about every day, but it catches the reflection, I don't know, of the moon or something, and lights up. So no, it's not just when they're like new in orbit.
I kind of like satellites though when they're like in the sky. They're nice to kind of look at. Have you ever heard the story of the family in the Soviet Union who were this crazy religious type who, when the communists took over, they fled to Siberia. There, because there's a lot of crazy Eastern Orthodox religion people there. So they fled. They went to this valley in Siberia that they ended up not having contact with anyone outside the world for 50 years. I don't think they were discovered until the late 70s. So like it was a guy and his wife, and they ended up having like 8-10 kids. But it was interesting, like when they talked to this guy after 50 years of isolation, he was not surprised when he was told that humans had gone into space, because he had noticed that like we had started moving stars, is what he said.
Really?
Like, oh no, I saw that like we were moving stars, and I assumed that we had gone up and like started moving the stars. Yeah. Which I love that story of like, he was able to put not necessarily 2 and 2 together, but like he was able to figure out there was a 2 here and a 2 there, and like surmised that it was approximately 4.
That is wild, isn't it? Yeah, I always look for satellites. That's like the first, whenever we're out camping, I always, especially with people who are new looking at the stars, it's always one of my things. Like, all right, first person to spot a satellite.
That one, you gotta show them the North Star right away. Yeah, be like, oh, there's the North Star, guys. You can tell because there's the Big Dipper. And then track satellites.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, hey, Mac, this has been fun, man. I think I'm gonna wind her down here, but what I guess a couple more for you. What's on the list still of the high priority list of wish list trips that you'd like to do, or places you'd like to visit?
For sure. So if I were to start with like North America, I really want to spend more time in like Wyoming, Montana. I've done a little bit, but like I've never done a Wind River trip.
Oh, the Wind Rivers are the best.
Incredible.
Man.
The Beartooth there.
Beartooths are great.
Yeah. That's a part of North America I've never been to and love to go. And of course, like I'd love to do Alaska. I've never been to Alaska. I need to do it.
I know I do.
I know I do. I just need to do it. And then internationally, There's this is going to be very obscure. It's a place called the Gorno-Badakhshan Autonomous Oblast.
Okay.
It is the eastern half of
It's a
the country of
mouthful.
Tajikistan. Yes. So it's the eastern half of Tajikistan. It's the Pamir Mountains, which Marco Polo called the roof of the world when he went to China. He had to travel over them to get there. And it's where like China ends and Central Asia begins. And it's the Pamiri ethnic group is there, and they're not Tajik. And Tajikistan is a very authoritarian country, and the leader there has not liked some of the expressions of opinion that have come out of that region. So oftentimes they will shut it down to foreigners. So to get there at all, you have to get a permit from the Tajik government. But it's supposed to be this just gorgeous area of these massive mountain ranges and these huge valleys coming up. So it's kind of where Afghanistan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, and China meet. And that's a place in the world that I always meant to go to because I was around there. I never got the chance. I did like a week in Tajikistan once, but I never went over that far east. So that is up there on my list for world stuff. Another place in the world that I've heard great things about is Namibia. I've had people say Namibia is just gorgeous. And then another one is like kind of Guyana, that area of South America, where it's like not Latin America. Like the culture of there and like Trinidad and Tobago and Suriname fascinate me, and I'd love to go there sometime.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just south of Suriname a little bit in Brazil in November, just barely south of it, and yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
in the thick Amazon, and yeah, really cool experience.
The cultures there is something I want, because it is a mix of like South American, and you have the colonialism, but also they brought a lot of like labor out of South and East Asia in order to have that colonialism. So you get a mix of indigenous, Latin American, South Asian, East Asian. You still have Dutch and British influence, and that's the kind of place I want to like explore and feel out. You know,
I hear you. There's a lot of places to get to.
the world is big. It's there's a lot to see out there.
There is. All right, there you have it. Episode 48 of Buffalo Roamer Outdoors with Mac Scheldrup. If you're liking the show, don't forget to subscribe. That makes sure you'll get the new and latest episodes when they drop. We do 2 episodes each and every month, and they're released on the first and third Fridays of the month. You can find out more about what we have going on, listen to all of our websites, check out the fishing blog I have, look at some of the guided and hosted river trips we have. Find out all that and more at buffaloroamer.com. All right, go get outside, get some fresh air. We'll talk to you next time.